Hello, everybody. My name is Michele Tana, and I am a gastroenterologist and hepatologist at UCSF. And today I'm going to be telling you about our initiative, which we're currently calling the North American Alliance for Autoimmune Hepatitis. So, to give you a sense of today's talk, we're going to go over what is the NAAIH. Then we're going to talk about how it began, what we've done so far, what we're planning for the future, and then we're going to kind of focus on today. And if we have time, we'll do a live poll. So the North American Alliance for Autoimmune Hepatitis is an initiative to unite clinicians, researchers, and others interested in advancing the field of autoimmune hepatitis. And it's really our effort to organize researchers and other people in North America for the advancement of the field. And so how did this initiative begin? Obviously, Craig has had a big role in this, and Craig and I have been collaborating for several years, so we've talked about this need for collaboration of researchers in America because, as you all know, autoimmune hepatitis is not a common disease, and being relatively rare, it makes it hard to study. And so, yeah, at a liver meeting several years ago, we chatted about how we're going to get people together, which centers to involve, and how we're going to organize this effort. Also, David Assis at Yale has been really instrumental in getting this alliance together. And he and I are now actually part of the International Autoimmune Hepatitis Group. You may have heard about the International Autoimmune Hepatitis Group because they came up with some of the diagnostic scores that a lot of your clinicians may have used to give you a diagnosis of autoimmune hepatitis. And then Ansgar Loos is one of our collaborators in Germany, and he's, I think, one of the leaders of the European Reference Network for Rare Liver Diseases. And, you know, I have to say that the Europeans have historically been much more organized about their autoimmune hepatitis research, or they do a really good job of coming together. And Ethan and I were just talking about this yesterday, that like a lot of the European countries have very well organized registries of all their patients. And some of that has to do with like just their government structure and their healthcare systems. But Ansgar, leading ERN Rare Liver, you know, it's a pretty small community. And so he has also been kind of encouraging us in America to do something similar to get organized and accomplish more in terms of autoimmune hepatitis research. So the Alliance had our first meeting virtually during one of the major GI conferences called Digestive Diseases Week, or DDW, in May of this year. And what we did was we tried to get the word out by publicizing through the American Association for the Study of Liver Diseases special interest group on autoimmune liver diseases. A lot of acronyms here. So it was the ASLD, CALD, SIG. Of which, you know, Craig and I are a part. David was the chair a couple years ago. And that's basically the message that we sent out, inviting providers and researchers interested in AIH to attend this open meeting. We talked about envisioning an alliance of researchers across North America to share expertise and resources, and close collaboration with patients. That's where you guys come in, sponsors and other researchers. And we did it over Zoom with the purpose of gauging interest. That first meeting was really just to see like who would be interested in doing this, brainstorming and discussing, you know, the group's goals, structure, and timeline. And over 50 people from various centers actually not just in the United States and Canada, but actually outside of these countries as well, registered showing interest in the meeting. Because even though like we envisioned this North American alliance, we weren't exactly going to like tell people from Europe, no, you can't come. Okay, so this was our agenda. We wanted to discuss the vision, purpose, project ideas, infrastructure, talk about the role of the AIHA, next steps in discussion. And then these are some of the things that we talked about. So again, the vision and our purpose, networking and mentoring are other purposes too. And then kind of how this alliance would be interacting with, but yet have a different role than the SIG that I told you about, or the international group, or the AIHA. So it was a very lively discussion. People were really interested. And we went over we talked about different areas of research that people were interested in or thought needed to be studied. What are the gaps in our knowledge? And then, kind of using the alliance as a regular forum for the exchange of ideas, where people could bounce research thoughts off of each other. And, ideally, we want this alliance to be a forum for organizing centers and executing multi-center clinical trials, or potentially natural history studies. And then these are some of our thoughts on infrastructure. So quarterly or biannual meetings, I think that could work well because a lot of hepatologists attend the liver meeting in the fall and DDW in the spring. Of course, sharing ideas during these meetings, and then we've touched on different agreements that would be necessary to have an organized alliance. So agreements on the use of data, authorship, publication, and then so that we're not reinventing the wheel, learning from other similar organizations. So I mentioned the European Reference Network, but also the primary sclerosing cholangitis group has been pretty effective. They have an international PSC study group. So here we are, AIHA, Partners in AIH Research. This has definitely been promoted to the Alliance as you guys as a group that we want to work together with closely. And so here are some highlights or minutes from the meeting in May. Some key themes for projects were translational studies based on pooled biobanked samples. Some hospitals and centers have already been collecting biospecimens, and so that was discussed, like collaborating in order to do translational studies where we're learning from the patient, going to the laboratory, and then bringing that information back to the bedside. Also discussed was a database using this software program called REDCap to log information about patients with autoimmune hepatitis, to learn about natural history or disease course and phenotyping, or like different types of autoimmune hepatitis, because, as Craig was saying yesterday, autoimmune hepatitis is kind of lumped together as one disease, but in many ways it seems like a heterogeneous disease, and each patient's individual, but kind of as the pathologist was saying, right, like under the slide, it all looks the same, but there could be many different phenotypes or different sort of types of patients. And also we talked about how this alliance could help promote more clinical trials in autoimmune hepatitis treatment. We talked about studies of real-world effectiveness of drugs that are already in use, like budesonide. And then, of course, this forum for exchange. And then we also went over some of the organizational aspects of getting an initiative like this off the ground. So we're thinking that we'll have a steering committee, which we want to form soon. And then it was suggested that we have members of that steering committee assigned to particular roles. So maybe one person's the biobank organizer, maybe one person is in charge of the databases, maybe one person is kind of the treasurer helping to push forward efforts to obtain funding. And then we talked about, again, sort of bylaws or agreements for the group. There was some discussion of clarifying our relationship with the AIHA. And then also there was discussion of like, oh, do we need to make this a legal entity as like a 501c3? And then we also discussed potential sources of funding. So some of the hepatologists were like, well, we should definitely get this alliance off the ground with the end in mind and think about like, how are we going to get funding. There's supposedly a request for applications coming out from the ASLD Foundation soon, kind of geared towards autoimmune liver diseases. Maybe that's something the Alliance could apply for. Also, obviously, the National Institutes of Health would be amazing to get funding from, and they have funded several kind of large national multi-center cooperative research networks for other liver diseases like metabolic dysfunction associated steatotic liver disease. They've done it for acute liver failure, drug-induced liver injury, et cetera. So why not for autoimmune hepatitis? The FDA, pharmaceutical companies, and then private donors were also brought up. Okay, so then that meeting went well. But it was only an hour long, and the issue is it's a lot of effort to organize and keep the momentum going. So over the summer, we sent out a survey to all the doctors who had expressed interest in the Alliance, and we asked them, are you a clinician, a clinical researcher, basic translational researcher? And this was the answers. So 60-some% were clinicians or clinical researchers, and then we had fewer basic translational scientists. So what should the aims of the Alliance be? And the sort of most highly voted answers were to improve the delivery of healthcare to patients with autoimmune hepatitis, organize autoimmune hepatitis clinical research, translational research, and networking, interacting with other groups, and then mentoring people. These were less popular answers. Okay, then we asked the interested researchers, how interested are you in these various topics? And 5 is most interested, and 1 is like not interested. 3 is like moderately. So translational studies based on these pooled biospecimens, pretty good interest. 12 people said very, and 12 people said moderately interested. And then for a database for natural history and phenotyping, maybe a little bit more interest. I think this is a project that more people could sort of immediately contribute to, because you don't need stored biospecimens already. Multi-center trials, 71% were very interested in helping to design and participate in multi-center trials. Then 56% very interested in studying real-world experience with various drugs. 38% interested in using this alliance as a forum for discussing challenging cases and mentoring trainees. I will say that there are probably other forums already in existence where we can share challenging cases and mentor trainees. Like, I don't know, Ethan, if you've been part of the SIGs, there's like an app that we have for people in the special interest group. So maybe this isn't as much of a need. And then referring patients to AIH Connect, which is AIHA's current registry of data provided by patients. So 44%, we're very interested in that. And then survey-based or patient-oriented studies through AIHA, 47%. And then we went over specific research questions that are currently, either unanswered or not well studied about autoimmune hepatitis in North America. So 38% gave it a 4 in terms of how interested they were in studying the remission rate in North American AIH patients. There have been studies looking at that in Europe. What proportion of North American AIH patients are on long-term corticosteroids as part of their maintenance regimen? 44% gave that a 4. What's the rate of remission in patients receiving budesonide versus prednisone? 38% gave that question a 5. What are predictors of incomplete response to treatment, or what are predictors of decompensation? 74% of people were very interested in this question. So, I think as patients, these questions and answers give you a sense of how researchers are thinking about issues in autoimmune hepatitis and what still is unknown and needs to be studied. So, for instance, this question and survey responses from the hepatologists kind of tells you that we don't have great tools for risk stratifying or prognosticating for patients with autoimmune hepatitis. And then how common are various side effects from AIH treatments used in North America? 41% of patients were very interested in this research question. And then, some of the bylaws that we discussed and were popular, authorship agreements, this is kind of like data sovereignty, where each center, even though they contribute their data, it's still they still retain ownership over it and have to give specific permission for a given study. And then, having a group name that would be put on publications. And then it seems like we're going to go with this steering committee structure. 88% of people wanted to do that. And then we also polled people about their practice of autoimmune hepatitis. How many people with AIH are seen at your center in a given year? And so, a quarter had less than 50 patients, 36%, 51 to 100, 21% of respondents said that they see 100 to 200 AIH patients every year, and then 18% said that their center sees more than 200 in a given year. And then most of the hepatologists involved in the alliance thus far are adult hepatologists. 15% were pediatric, 12% do both adults and kids. Okay, so then after we got those survey results back, David, Assis, Craig Lambert, and I thought that our next step should be to create a mission and vision statement, just draft a document, and then get feedback on it, because we're thinking that this alliance is going to need to just clarify our purpose. And so here's some quotes from the statement as it stands now, but we're still editing, and we're going to get more feedback. Also, at the end of this presentation, I want to hear your guys' feedback. So think about what you think we should do differently, what's looking good, and what we should add to our purpose. So right now, the mission is written as to improve the health of patients with autoimmune hepatitis by collaborating on initiatives within North America. I notice now, research is not a word in that sentence, but, that might be intentional if we want to leave it broad, but I do think that research is kind of where this initiative is coming from. Our vision, a North American network of clinicians, researchers, and disease stakeholders committed to improving the health of patients with AIH through close collaborative interaction amongst themselves and with other invested groups to accomplish research, education, and advocacy goals. So again, even though I think this is coming from like a research standpoint, we also included education and advocacy goals because we can sort of envision collaborating on advocacy work potentially in the future. And a lot of us are involved in medical education. We talked about networking to wanting to mentor the next generation of AIH researchers. Okay, so here's what we have for goals. Organizing AIH clinical research studies to improve the delivery of care. Our second goal is to promote networking amongst investigators and mentoring trainees interested in AIH. And then our third goal is interacting with groups like AIHA, the SIG, IAIHG, a lot of acronyms there. And then our priorities. We tried to organize them into like short-term, medium-term, and long-term priorities. So our short-term priorities are to figure out our alliance structure and organization and engage people from Canada and Mexico, as well as the United States. Surveys of interested parties, so we've done one of those already. And then establishing connection with patients, the AIHA, potential sponsors. There was some representation from the NIH at the May meeting during DDW. And then also ASLD and industry, right? You guys heard from the Kezar Bio company people who are running the trial currently, looking at mipsimib, I think. And then another short-term priority is just networking. Medium-term, so maybe in the short-term near future, we'll get some collaborative studies going, starting small, maybe more with retrospective studies, and facilitating biospecimen use for translational studies, and then getting funding from smaller sources like foundations or private donors. And then our long-term priorities are these like bigger endeavors, right? Prospective funded studies and trials, larger grants, maybe from the NIH, and then again, intervention clinical trials. So these are some skills that we're thinking would be helpful on the steering committee. So patient representatives, if you guys are interested or want to spread the word. Trainee members, it's always good to involve the younger, hepatology fellows, medicine residents interested in hepatology, and then a communications person, maybe a trials liaison would be good. An ethics chair would be great, I think. And, there's always a lot of IRB kind of institutional review board work to be done with any sort of clinical research. A legal chair, because there's a lot of contracts and data sharing agreements required with this kind of collaborative research. A statistics chair, Ethan, you and I were talking about that, right? Like that's really a key skill set. Maybe someone to lead the database, the biospecimens, and then your typical secretary and treasurer. I will say that we have been trying to, as I said, learn from other organizations. The International Autoimmune Hepatitis Group, they've been pretty effective, but their leadership, previously at one point was just like 2 secretaries. I feel like that's not enough people, because this is all kind of unfunded work. And of course, those secretaries are like busy transplant hepatologists. So, but good news is that on that survey that we sent out over the summer, 18 of the respondents expressed interest in potentially serving on a steering committee. So we're thinking, give people sort of defined roles and more work will happen. And then also in this document, we have written out some values and agreements. So values would, so far, are inclusivity, social justice, and then agreements, kind of like those bylaws in the survey, right? Data sovereignty, publications, and authorship. Okay, so that was kind of what we've done so far, and then future steps, we gotta kind of solidify the name of this group, but, so far we're referring to it as the Alliance. And then again, like, working towards obtaining some funding. And then this conference was part of our plan to get the Alliance off the ground and get connected with AIHA and input from patients. And then the liver meeting is just next month, so we're planning to have another meeting there, which you guys could tell your hepatologists about. A lot of hepatologists go to that annual meeting sponsored by the American Association for the Study of Liver Diseases. We even have a room, so we're going to be sending out a save the date for that meeting. We're going to meet, I think, on the Saturday in one of the hotel conference rooms. So now, to the present, here we are at the AIHA conference. So how can the AIHA and the Alliance work together? We mentioned maybe having a patient representative on the steering committee. And Craig and Aaron obviously are extremely involved in the efforts to get the Alliance off the ground. And then the AIHA has already done research and published sort of areas and gaps that the patients want to study. But that might change over time. So sort of continued communication on topics of interest would be helpful. And then I can see, the AIHA and the Alliance working together on advocacy efforts, education efforts, both for patients and for providers about autoimmune hepatitis. And then participation, helping with participation and recruitment for research studies. But I'm definitely open to hearing your guys' thoughts on how you think that we can move this Alliance forward. So I don't know if it's set up through the app to do a poll. Not sure.
I'm just here to pass the microphone around if anyone has questions.
Okay, and I don't think Kelsey's here. So,
Right out there.
Hey Kelsey, hi. Do you think the poll function is gonna work?
Is it active? Or is it not on your phone? I set them as active.
Okay,
It should be on there.
let's see. Polling.
Let me double check. Sometimes it just doesn't want to work.
You could also try closing the app and reopening it. Sometimes that helps.
Okay.
It's like turning off and turning back on your computer when it turns off.
I have two of them shown as active.
Oh, yeah, I see two, but they're not for this talk. Oh, wait, yeah, that's okay. I mean, we couldn't really think of a great poll question for you guys, I think. It's like, do you have suggestions for us? Yes, no, or maybe. So you could just shout out if, what your answer is. Yeah, and then this is some contact info for Aaron and myself. You probably have Craig's email address. I should have put David's too.
Dr. Tana, I can make it really quick if you just, can I see that slide?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, hello, hi, yes.
Do you want that, or I can speak up?
Yeah.
It's not that big a deal.
I'm just getting out my notebook.
So I'm really happy to see this because the AIHA is a predominantly patient-focused organization, but this is a disease state that desperately needs a core of committed clinicians and scientists. Because I think if you have both of those things, then you can demonstrate significant unmet need, which will then drive pharma interest because they have to know that there's a market
Yep.
before they're going to do research.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, I worked in pharma for 16 years.
Did
so
you? Okay,
yeah,
great.
yeah. So I think it's hugely important. And then I have one other question, which you or one of the other physicians in here might know. You talked a little bit about the Kezar trial. Do you know of any off-label work with bortezomib, ixazomib, or carfilzomib, the other 3 proteasome inhibitors?
I have not heard about any other AIH-related research. Have you? No.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. Are you more interested in those than Zito for a reason?
The only reason I'm interested is I did work with bortezomib and ixazomib, and so I have a background in that.
Oh.
I'm just curious.
Do you think that those could be effective in AIH?
They certainly have immune responsiveness, and they've been used anecdotally for other immune diseases.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
But,
cool.
you know, I have no clue as to what dose or what kind of side effects you're going to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Depending on the
Yeah.
dose.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Poll should be active.
Okay. Pull away, guys. It's kind of a cool feature. But yeah, I was going to say it's great that this is a small group, so we can really hear your thoughts on like what we discussed. Any questions about the Alliance so far? Hi. Yeah. Do you want to actually say your name and where you're from? I didn't catch your name.
Yeah, I forgot my name tag.
Yeah. What is your name?
My name's Ian Van Busker,
Great. Where are you from?
outside of Columbus, Ohio.
Great. Thank you, Ann.
I'm Mike Markey, and I'm not a clinician, but I am a basic and translational research just down the road in Dayton, Ohio, at a medical
Excellent.
school.
Oh.
And so I'm here for my wife this weekend, but if professionally I could help with AIH, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Is there room in the Alliance for interested research parties, maybe specifically in genomics?
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Yeah.
Can
yeah.
I get on a mailing list or something? I'd be
Definitely.
very excited to.
Yeah, I think you can email me or Aaron, and we'll add you to the
Okay.
mailing list, or you can just give me your email address later.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll text you through the app if
that's true. Yeah, we can all connect through the app. Thanks. Yeah. I mean, and you're talking about desperate needs, and yeah, I mean, I think that one major need is for us to apply genomic technology to autoimmune hepatitis, so that would be fantastic. I mean, if you think about it, right, like, it's pretty remarkable and a little bit sad that we're still using prednisone as the mainstay of therapy, like, what has it been now, 70 years since the first description of autoimmune hepatitis. So there is a lot of need here and a lot to be done. All right, well, thank you guys so much for listening, and feel free to reach out.